I returned home after 7 years to attend Aunt Esther's funeral. As I stood by the cookie table, my husband leaned in and whispered, "Don't you see it? This isn't a funeral. It's a performance." I hadn't been home in 7 years. Not since the Christmas where my mother called me, exhausting, and then asked if I could refill the wine in the same breath. Even then, I'd only stayed 2 days. But when I got the call that Aunt Esther had passed, there wasn't a decision to make. She was the only one who ever felt like mine in this family, soft-spoken, stubborn, and sharp in ways that never needed to shout. She didn't raise me, not officially, but she held me through most of what my parents ignored. That counts for more. Julian and I flew in the night before. I barely slept. Now, as I stood under a rented canopy in my childhood church's parking lot, staring at people I couldn't name, holding paper cups of lemonade like they were at a graduation party, I couldn't help but think, this doesn't feel like a funeral. It feels like a networking event. There were caterers passing around sliders. Someone had made a slideshow with royalty-free music so upbeat I thought we were about to sell timeshares. And people were smiling. Not wistfully, not sadly, just smiling. I recognized a few faces from old family photos. The rest? Strangers. Not just to me, to her. I was sure of it. My mother floated from group to group like a well-dressed ghost, dabbing her eyes at precisely timed intervals. Beside her, Rachel, my cousin, looked like she'd stepped out of a funeral fashion catalog, complete with a black veil she kept adjusting dramatically for effect. I stood to the side with Julian, holding my breath. I hadn't cried yet. I was still trying to find the grief underneath all the decor. Then Julian leaned in, voice low and razor-sharp. "This isn't grief," he said. "This is a performance." And the worst part? I already knew he was right, but I wasn't ready for how deep the act would go. I tried, I really did, to let it go. To chalk the awkward laughter up to nerves, the oddly cheerful music to poor taste, the sliders and lemonade to Midwestern hospitality. But then I started listening, and what I heard, or rather what I didn't hear, is what broke the illusion. No one was talking about her. Not about her lemon pies that always tasted like they held some kind of secret. Not about her tendency to hum ABBA when she sewed. Not about how she used to read me bedtime stories in that low, steady voice that made the monsters under the bed fall asleep, too. Instead, they said things like, "She was lovely, wasn't she? So full of grace. She had such beautiful handwriting." It was like someone had written a vague obituary and handed it out as a script. Everyone stuck to it. And when someone, I think it was a neighbor, tried to tell a real story about the time Aunt Esther flooded the kitchen trying to fix the sink by herself, my mother interrupted with a sharp little laugh and said, "That doesn't sound like her at all." Except it did. It sounded exactly like her. Meanwhile, Rachel, my cousin with the funeral veil, cried at exactly 3 intervals. Once during the eulogy, once during a song, and once, and this is my favorite, when someone asked about the flower arrangements. All 3 times, the mascara smudged just enough to look photogenic. Not too much. Not too messy. I started watching her like I was studying a performance I hadn't been cast in. She hugged people like she was being filmed, tilted her head when she listened, even dabbed the corner of her mouth with a tissue as if grief was something you could smudge like lipstick. And maybe the most glaring thing, the casket was closed. I know, that's not unusual. People say it's for dignity, for peace, for privacy. But Aunt Esther wasn't in an accident. She hadn't been ill, at least no one told me she was. She was, according to the email, peacefully asleep. So, why not let us see her one last time? When I asked, my mother touched my arm in that condescending way she's perfected over decades and said, Claire, darling, you don't want to remember her that way. And when I pressed, gently, I swear, about the will, just to ask if it had already been read, the smile fell from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "Oh, honey," she said. "This isn't the time for paperwork." No one else seemed to be asking. No one else even seemed curious. It was like they were all in on something. And I was just late to rehearsal. It's funny, the things that come back to you, not in order, not like a slideshow, but in flashes. Like the sound of her kettle whistling from 3 rooms away. The smell of cinnamon and old paper. The way she used to rest her hand lightly on my back when I cried, never saying shoo, never rushing it, just letting me finish. When I was little, my parents were occupied, busy, distant, cold, if we're being honest. There were always more important things: work, travel, reputation. Meanwhile, I was the kid who forgot her lunch, who waited at school an hour too long, who had to knock on the neighbor's door to borrow sugar because Mom wasn't doing carbs that week. But Esther, she was constant. She didn't ask for attention, didn't need credit. She just showed up, over and over. Saturday mornings with pancakes and poetry. Tuesdays with mystery novels and tea. She taught me how to write, not just how to hold the pen, but how to put myself on the page. She said words were tiny maps. If you ever get lost, your voice will lead you home. She taught me how to make scrambled eggs that didn't taste like regret. How to patch a torn hem without crying about it. How to sit in silence with someone and make it feel like music. And once, just once, she said something I never forgot. We were sitting on the back porch. I was 14, maybe 15. She was drinking chamomile. I was sulking over some teenage drama. She looked at me, not with sympathy, but certainty, and said, "If anything ever happens, anything, I've made sure you're taken care of." I didn't understand it then. I thought she meant emotionally, or maybe snacks. But now, standing in this hollow, high-budget funeral filled with strangers and script readers, I couldn't stop thinking about it. She knew, even back then. She knew what this family could do, and she planned for it. I escaped to the bathroom the way a soldier retreats behind a wall, not to surrender, just to breathe without ducking. There was too much noise outside. Too many clinks of glass and the artificial murmur of grief voices, the kind people use when they want to sound solemn, but still want everyone to hear how appropriate they're being. I didn't cry. I just stood in front of the mirror, hands gripping the porcelain sink like it could anchor me to the floor. My reflection looked like a stranger, pale, eyes glassy, lips pressed so tight they could cut. I wasn't sad. I was suspicious. And that made me feel awful. Because who walks into their aunt's funeral and thinks something's off? Who starts counting how many people look like extras? I closed my eyes. And that's when I heard it. The door opened, softly. Not rushed, not awkward like someone needing privacy. No, this was deliberate. Heels clicked once, twice. Then, just outside the stall door, a voice. "Come." Almost gentle. "You're her niece, right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. "You should check the will. It's not what they say." And just like that, the footsteps turned. The door clicked shut. I burst out of the stall like I'd been shoved. "Wait, what?" "Hello." But the room was empty. No one. Not even a hint of perfume. Just the harsh light humming and the echo of 5 words carving themselves into the walls of my mind. "You should check the will." Not "there's something weird." Not "I'm concerned." It was a warning. A direction. Like someone handing you a flashlight before cutting the power. My heart was pounding. Not scared. Not yet, but alert, like something in me had finally stood up straight. I stared into the mirror again. This time, I saw someone different. someone bracing for truth. When I stepped back outside, Julian found me immediately. His hand touched the small of my back, quiet, steady. I didn't speak yet. I was still trying to figure out if what I heard had really happened or if I'd finally cracked under the weight of politeness. We walked together toward the edge of the lot, where the noise dulled and the air smelled like roses and dust. Then I told him every word about the woman, the whisper, the stall, the silence. Julian listened, nodding slowly. And then he said, "I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to make things worse." I turned to him. "Tell me what?" He hesitated, then leaned in. "I overheard your mom and Uncle Martin earlier, near the kitchen door. They didn't see me." "What were they talking about?" "Paperwork. Documents. Something about finalizing things before she showed up." "She?" I asked. His look said everything. "Oh, they meant me." They were trying to tie off the loose ends before I even walked through the door. Before I could ask questions. Before I could find anything that wasn't part of the script. And just like that, the grief fog lifted. The warmth, the flowers, the curated memories, they all rearranged themselves into something else entirely. Not mourning. A cover-up. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not the family group chat. Not even Julian. I didn't sigh. I didn't flinch. I just opened my phone and searched for the address of Lawrence and Cobb, LLP, the same name printed in faded gray ink on the corner of an old letter Aunt Esther once sent me years ago. Just beneath her signature, it said, "Well prepared by." The office was about a 20-minute drive from the church, a small building with weathered blue shingles and 2 wilted planter boxes out front, like even the flowers had. "Stop trying." I knocked. A young receptionist opened the door. I introduced myself, gave Aunt Esther's full name, and said I needed to speak with whoever had handled her file. They led me into a quiet room that smelled like old wood and overzealous air conditioning. Behind the desk sat an older man with silver hair, tortoiseshell glasses, and the kind of face that had seen too many people think they knew the truth. His name was Mr. Cobb. I explained, carefully and calmly. My aunt had passed. I'd just come from the funeral, and I had reason to believe the will might not have been handled properly. I said I just wanted to verify. Nothing dramatic. Nothing accusatory. Just clarity. He gave me that look, the one people give when they're already preparing to dismiss you. "I'm afraid the will was read 3 weeks ago. All relevant parties were present." I nodded. Then I pulled a printed email from my bag, the one my mother had sent me. It was short, cold. A basic notification of Esther's passing. No mention of a reading. No invitation. No room for questions. I placed it on the desk between us. I wasn't invited. I wasn't informed. And I'm the only person in this family who ever actually lived with her. He read the email. Something in his face shifted. "Your name is Claire Montgomery?" I nodded. He opened a drawer, pulled out a thick file folder. From it, he removed a single cream-color document, typed in clean serif font, with a familiar signature a little shaky at the bottom. He slid it across the desk toward me. "This is the original." I didn't touch it. I just read. And as my eyes moved past the opening paragraph, then the next, I saw my name. Claire Montgomery. Everything, the house, the savings account, the royalties from Esther's beloved cookbook series was left to me. I felt like someone had just closed a door behind me. Not loud, not violent, just locked it. Mr. Cobb cleared his throat and pulled out a second sheet of paper. This one was submitted about 2 weeks later, notarized, signed, but the signature doesn't quite match. I looked at it. It was close, but not the same. Like someone trying to forge the hand of a woman who once loved me without conditions. I looked up. I want to know what's really going on. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd walked in, he looked genuinely concerned. So, do I? I read that line 3 times. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed to carve each word into memory, like they could somehow make up for the 3 weeks I was kept in the dark. All assets to Claire Montgomery. The house. The savings account. The cookbook royalties Aunt Esther had spent nearly a lifetime building. I didn't cry. I just went still, like the child I once was sitting in the kitchen corner, listening to adults argue behind closed doors, knowing that speaking up might break everything. But this time, I wasn't a child. Mr. Cobb rotated the second page gently, the so-called updated will, submitted just weeks later. The formatting was clean. The new beneficiary, Lucille Montgomery, my mother. I skimmed it. Almost every clause mirrored the original, except the last part, and the signature. I leaned in closer. The signature looked convincing. To someone else, maybe, but not to me. Aunt Esther never extended the tail on her like that. She wrote with a slight left slant, never upright. She always used blue ink. This was black. And more than anything, it was empty. The signature had no soul. No esté. I looked up. Mr. Cobb met my eyes like he knew I'd seen it too. I can't make any official claims without proper verification, he said carefully. But I'll admit, this version raises concerns. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. My hands didn't shake. There was no hesitation. I called the police. I'd like to report a suspected case of legal document forgery. A will. The original was signed by my aunt. The altered version lists my mother as beneficiary. I have both documents, and I have reason to believe the signature was faked. There was a pause on the other end. Then, they asked for the address. Told me to keep the originals. Said someone would follow up. I nodded even though they couldn't see me. When I hung up, I glanced around the small room. The fake flower arrangement was fading. A framed beach print hung crooked on the wall. The whole place felt like it existed solely to house the truths no one wanted to face. I stood. Thank you, Mr. Cobb. I'll let the law take it from here. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, quietly, she'd be proud of you. For the first time in a very long time, I knew I was doing the right thing. I didn't drive home right away. I circled the old neighborhood first, past the bookstore where Aunt Esther used to take me every summer, past the ice cream shop she once called a vacation in a cone. They were all closed now. The signs faded, the paint peeling. And like everything else here, they felt more like memories than places. When I pulled up to my mother's house, the police were already there. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just the quiet presence of something that couldn't be undone. My mother stood on the porch, arms crossed. Uncle Martin lingered behind her, his face flushed like a man just caught stealing silverware. I stepped out of the car. Not fast. Not shaky. Just tired, the kind of tired you feel after looking at something ugly for too long. She looked at me like I was a stranger. The police? She said, her voice sharp. How predictable, Claire. But not surprising. You've always seen yourself as a victim. I clenched my fists. Not from anger, from not knowing where else to put my hands. Why did you do it? I asked. Did you hate me that much? Enough to steal what she left for me. She laughed. Not joyfully. Not bitterly. Just hollow. Esther had nothing, she said. That wasn't yours. It belonged to the family. To the ones who stayed. I swallowed hard. I am family, I said. I just wasn't the kind you wanted to keep. Behind me, an officer softly called my mother's name. Asked her to cooperate. No handcuffs. No raised voices. Just a request to come answer questions, to surrender the documents, to begin a formal investigation into signature forgery and estate fraud. She didn't argue, didn't speak. She just turned away, her back straight, her shoulders small. And that walk, once something I thought of as graceful, now just looked cold. I stood there for a long time, until the gold headlights of the patrol car disappeared down the street. A week later, I got the call from the lawyer. Mr. Cobb's voice was calm, professional as always, but something in the way he said, "Congratulations, Claire. Everything's been confirmed," made me place a hand over my chest. I didn't jump. I didn't cry. I just exhaled.
Slow. Long.
I was the legal heir. No one could erase that now. No more, it was never yours. No more, you think you're the victim. No more being left out of things that used to feel like mine. But here's the strange part. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no victory. Just a strange, quiet peace. I returned to Aunt Esther's house on a soft, rainy afternoon. The key was still in the envelope Mr.
Cobb gave me.
The lock clicked. The door opened like it had been waiting. Inside, everything was dusted in silence, not abandonment, just the gentle passing of time. The air smelled of old wood, dried flowers, and memory. The armchair by the window was still in place. I walked straight to the kitchen. Her cookbook shelf stood just as I remembered, neat, orderly, with corners folded and pages worn from love. I pulled one off the shelf. It was the first one she ever published, a part of my childhood I'd forgotten I was part of. I flipped through.
Peartort.
Ginger broth. Sunflower seed bread. Each recipe in her voice calm, clear, never rushed. At the final page, there it was, a note, handwritten in faded blue ink, shaky but unmistakable. Claire, this is yours. Always was. I sank onto the kitchen floor, book resting on my knees. No one to tell. No one to prove anything to. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't need to. I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's story. I was home, not because I claimed it, but because it was always mine. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a silence you've lived with, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below. And if you want more stories like this, stories about truth, family, and finally saying what no one else will, hit subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. You're not alone.